The wind screamed across the frozen plain like a wounded animal. Taman stood at the window of his small outpost, watching the sky turn from gray to black. He had seen storms before on this planet, but nothing like this. The weather monitor beeped loudly on his desk, flashing red warnings that made his stomach tight with worry. Category 5 atmospheric event, the computer voice announced in its calm, emotionless tone. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Taman grabbed his emergency pack and ran toward the landing pad where his small transport waited. He was the only human at this atmospheric processing station, 40 kilometers from the main mining colony. Usually he liked the quiet. Today he wished he was closer to other people. The moment he stepped outside, the cold hit him like a physical blow. Even through his insulated suit, he could feel the temperature dropping. The snow was already ankle-deep, and falling so thick he could barely see 5 meters ahead. He pushed forward, leaning into the wind. Then the lightning came. It wasn't the kind of lightning Taman knew from Earth. This was purple and green, crackling across the sky in massive sheets. One bolt struck near the landing pad, and the explosion threw him backward into a snowdrift. His ears rang. When his vision cleared, he saw his transport burning, pieces of metal scattered across the ice. He was trapped. Taman stumbled back to the outpost, his hands shaking from more than just cold. Inside, he sealed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. The monitor was still beeping. The storm would last at least 12 hours, maybe more. He had food, water, and heat. He would survive. Then the thermal scanner caught his attention. 3 small heat signatures appeared on the screen, about half a kilometer northwest. They were faint, getting weaker. Taman zoomed in and felt his heart skip. The shapes were too small to be adults, too clustered together, and the temperature readings were dropping fast. Children, alien children, probably Vraken from the survey team that had been working in the area. They must have been caught when the storm hit. Taman's hands moved before his brain caught up, opening the communication channel to the main colony. Commander Daehyun's face appeared on the screen, looking stressed and tired. Taman, report. Did you make it out? Negative, sir. Transport destroyed. But that's not why I'm calling. I've got 3 heat signatures, half a click from my position. Small ones. I think they're Vraken cubs. Daehyun's expression changed from concern to something harder. I see them on our long range. Vraken rescue team is en route, but they're 14 hours out. The cubs won't last that long in this cold. Then let me go get them, sir. I can reach them in 20 minutes. Negative. Daehyun's voice was firm. You know the law, Taman. Galactic Council Law 47B. Humans cannot intervene in alien affairs without explicit authorization. We're still new to the Council. We can't afford to break their rules. Sir, they're children. They'll freeze to death. I understand that. But if you go out there and something goes wrong, if those cubs die while in human custody, it could destroy everything we've built with the Vraken. It could get Earth kicked out of the Council entirely. I'm sorry, Taman. The answer is no. The screen went dark. Taman stared at it for a long moment. He looked at the thermal scanner again. The 3 small shapes were huddled together in what looked like a shallow cave. Their heat signatures were fading. In an hour, maybe 2, they would be gone. He thought of Myung, his younger sister. She had died 5 years ago in a factory collapse on Earth. Taman had been off-world, too far away to help, too far away to even say goodbye. He remembered the crushing guilt, the endless questions. What if he had been there? What if he had tried? He wasn't going to ask those questions again. Taman disabled his communication beacon so they couldn't track him. He grabbed the emergency medical kit, 2 thermal blankets, a portable generator, and every heat pack he could find. He sealed them in a waterproof bag and pulled on his heaviest gear. At the door, he paused for just a second. Then he stepped into the storm. The world disappeared into white chaos. The wind tried to knock him down with every step. Snow filled his visor so fast he had to keep wiping it clear. His navigation system flickered and died from the electromagnetic interference. He had to navigate by instinct and the fading direction marker on his wrist display. 20 minutes became 30, then 40. His legs burned. Ice formed on his suit. He began to wonder if he would find them at all, or if he would just wander until he froze too. Then he saw the cave. It was barely more than a crack in a rock formation, but it was shelter. Taman dropped to his knees and crawled inside, pulling his bag after him. The wind noise dropped away. In the sudden quiet, he could hear breathing. Fast, shallow, frightened breathing. His helmet light swept across the small space. 3 pairs of eyes reflected back at him, wide with terror. Vraken cubs, just as he had thought. Their crystalline fur was coated in frost. The oldest looked maybe 7 in human years, a girl who held the other 2 close to her. One was a boy with a leg bent at a wrong angle, shivering violently. The smallest was barely moving at all. The oldest cub hissed at him, showing small sharp teeth. Her 4 eyes were bright with fear and defiance. She knew what humans were. Everyone in the galaxy knew. Humans were the dangerous newcomers, the species that couldn't be trusted. Taman slowly removed his helmet. His face was red from cold, his breath coming in white clouds. He held up his empty hands and spoke softly. "I know you're scared. I know you don't trust me. But your brother needs help, and I'm not leaving you out here." He spoke in simple galactic standard, hoping she understood. "My name is Taman. I'm here to help. Will you let me?" The girl didn't answer. She just held her siblings tighter. The injured boy whimpered. The smallest one didn't make any sound at all. Taman looked at them and felt his determination harden into something unbreakable. He had walked into a blizzard for them. He had broken the law for them. He wasn't going to fail now. But as he assessed their condition and felt the cave temperature with his bare hand, he realized something terrible. The injured boy was going into shock. The smallest cub was barely breathing. The storm outside was getting worse, not better. He couldn't carry all 3 back to his outpost through this. They would all die trying. He had only one choice. He had to build a shelter here. He had to make this cold, dark cave into a place where they could survive until the storm passed. And he had to do it fast because time was running out for all of them. Taman worked fast. Every second counted now. He pulled out his emergency kit and spread the contents across the cave floor. The oldest cub watched him with suspicious eyes, still holding her siblings close. He could see her shaking from the cold. "I need to help your brother first," Taman said gently, pointing at the boy with the injured leg. "Is that okay?" The girl hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. She loosened her grip just enough for Taman to reach the boy. Up close, he could see the cub's leg was badly twisted. The boy's eyes were glazed with pain and cold. His crystalline fur had lost its shine, turning dull and gray. Taman activated a small medical scanner. It wasn't designed for Vraken biology, but the basic readings were similar enough. Broken bone. Hypothermia setting in, blood pressure dropping. He had maybe an hour before the boy's system started to shut down. He opened the medical kit and found the inflatable splint. "This is going to hurt for a moment, but then it will feel better. I promise." He wasn't sure if the boy understood, but he worked as carefully as he could, straightening the leg and securing the splint. The boy cried out, and the oldest cub hissed again, but Taman kept talking in a calm voice. "I had a little sister once. Her name was Miyung. She broke her arm when she was 6. I helped her just like this. She was brave, just like your brother is being brave now." He wrapped the boy in one of the thermal blankets, then turned to the smallest cub. This one was in the worst shape, a girl barely breathing, her small body limp and cold. Taman wrapped her in his second thermal blanket and held her against his chest, using his own body heat to warm her. She was so light, so fragile. "I need to build us a better shelter," he told the oldest cub. "The cave isn't enough. Will you watch your brother and sister while I work?" The girl stared at him for a long moment, then spoke for the first time. Her voice was small and shaky. "Why are you helping us? Humans don't help others. Everyone says so." Taman felt something break inside his chest. "Everyone is wrong," he said quietly. "Humans help. We always help, especially when someone needs us." He placed the smallest cub gently in her sister's arms, then turned to the mouth of the cave. The storm howled outside like an angry beast. Snow was already piling up at the entrance. That gave him an idea. Taman put his helmet back on and crawled outside. The wind hit him immediately, trying to tear him away from the rock face. He planted his feet and began to work. Using a small collapsible shovel from his emergency kit, he started digging into the snowdrift that had formed against the cave entrance. Snow could be an insulator if used correctly. He carved out blocks of packed snow and ice, stacking them to create a windbreak at the cave mouth. It was back-breaking work. His hands went numb even inside his insulated gloves. His back screamed with effort, but slowly, the wall grew higher. Between the snow blocks, he packed smaller pieces of ice, filling the gaps. He used pieces of his own damaged equipment, metal strips from his ruined transport that he had grabbed, to reinforce the structure. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't perfect, but it would work. When the windbreak was chest-high, Taman crawled back inside. The difference was already noticeable. The howling wind had become a distant whistle. The cave felt smaller, but warmer. He pulled off his helmet and saw the oldest cub watching him with wide eyes. "You built a wall," she whispered. "Out of snow and ice." "I built a shelter," Taman corrected, managing a tired smile. "And I'm not done yet." He set up the portable, thermal generator in the center of the cave, activating it with numb fingers. The device hummed to life, beginning to pump warm air into the small space. It wouldn't last forever, maybe 8 hours on its battery, but that might be enough. Next, he spread the emergency thermal sheets on the cave floor, creating a barrier between them and the frozen ground. He activated chemical heat packs and placed them around the cubs. The temperature started to rise, not much, but enough. Enough to matter. The injured boy had stopped shivering as violently. The smallest cub's breathing was becoming more regular. These were good signs. Taman checked them both with the scanner again. They were stable. Not safe. Not healthy. But stable. "What are your names?" Taman asked the oldest cub as he worked. She watched him carefully before answering. "I am Hyejin. My brother is Jinwoo. My little sister is Bora." She paused. "Are we going to die?" The question was so direct, so honest, that Taman had to stop and look at her. "Not if I can help it. And I can help it, Hyejin. I promise you that. But you're just one human, and you're small, and you don't even have a ship anymore. How can you promise that?" Taman sat back on his heels, exhaustion suddenly washing over him. "Because I promised my sister something once, and I broke that promise. She died, and I wasn't there to help her. I can't change that. But I can make sure it doesn't happen again. I can make sure you three go home to your family." Hyejin was quiet for a moment. "Your sister died?" "Yes. 5 years ago. That's why you came for us. Even though it's dangerous. Even though we're not human." "That's why I came," Taman agreed. "Because someone has to. Because leaving you out here alone is not something I can do and still live with myself." He pulled out some emergency food rations from his pack, protein bars and nutrient paste. Not exactly delicious, but they would provide energy. He offered them to Hyejin. She sniffed them suspiciously, then took one and nibbled the edge. Her face wrinkled, but she ate it anyway. "It tastes strange," she said. "It tastes terrible," Taman agreed with a laugh. "But it will help you stay warm. Can you help Jinwoo eat some?" Hyejin nodded and carefully fed small pieces to her brother. Jinwoo ate slowly, his eyes more focused now. Bora was still unconscious, but Taman could see color returning to her crystalline fur. She would wake soon, he hoped. The hours passed slowly. Taman told them stories to keep them calm. He told them about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests. He told them about cities with buildings that touched the sky. He told them about his sister, about how she loved to draw pictures of stars even though she never got to see them up close. Hyejin listened to every word. Slowly, very slowly, her suspicion began to fade. She started asking questions. What did Earth smell like? Did humans really only have 2 eyes? Was it true that humans could eat almost anything? Why do other species think humans are scary? She asked at one point. Taman thought about how to answer. Because we're different. Because we do things other species don't do. We take risks. We break rules when we think the rules are wrong. We fight when we have to. That scares some people. But you're not scary, Hijin said softly. You're tired and your hands are shaking and you gave us your warm blanket. That's not scary. Thank you, Taman said, and he meant it more than she could know. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside their small shelter, warmth was slowly winning against the cold. The thermal generator hummed steadily. The cubs were alive. For now, that was enough. But Taman's own exhaustion was catching up to him. He had been awake for almost 20 hours. The trek through the storm had drained him. The work building the shelter had pushed him beyond his limits. His body was starting to shut down, demanding rest. He fought to keep his eyes open. He had to stay awake, had to monitor the cubs, had to make sure the generator kept running, had to watch for any signs that the storm was breaking, but his body had other ideas. The warmth of the shelter, after the brutal cold outside, made him drowsy. His vision started to blur. He could hear Hyejin saying something, but the words seemed to come from very far away. The last thing Taman saw before darkness took him was Hyejin's face, her 4 eyes wide with alarm. The last thing he felt was the cold floor of the cave against his cheek. Then nothing. Hyejin stared at the collapsed human in panic. One moment he had been talking to her, and the next he had just fallen over. She crawled closer, her heart beating fast. Was he dead? Had the human who saved them just died? She pressed her small hand against his chest like she had seen him do with the medical scanner. She could feel his heartbeat. Slow but steady. He was breathing too, each breath creating a small cloud in the cold air. Not dead then, just sleeping. Or passed out. She wasn't sure which. Hyejin looked at her siblings. Jinwoo was asleep, wrapped in the thermal blanket. His leg looked better in the splint and his breathing was normal. Bora was still unconscious, but her color was coming back. The human had saved them. Now he needed help. She was only 7 years old, but she knew about cold. She knew what happened when bodies got too cold. The human had given them everything warm. He had kept nothing for himself. That was why he had collapsed. Hyejin grabbed the thermal blanket that Taman had wrapped around Bora. Her sister had enough of the chemical heat packs around her now. The human needed warmth more. She dragged the blanket over to Taman, struggling with its weight, and spread it over his body as best she could. Then she looked around the shelter. The human had done so much. Built walls, made heat, fixed Jinwoo's leg, fed them, told them stories. Now it was her turn to do something. She studied the thermal generator, the device that was keeping them all alive. It had lights on it, green lights that meant it was working. She remembered watching Taman adjust something on the side. A dial. Carefully, she turned it slightly, increasing the heat output just a little. Not too much because she didn't want to break it, but enough to help. Hyejin dragged Taman closer to the generator, pulling on his arms. He was heavy, much heavier than she expected. She could only move him a little bit at a time. Her small muscles burned with the effort, but she kept going until he was in the warmest spot in the cave. The medical scanner lay on the ground where he had dropped it. Hyejin picked it up and held it over Taman's body like she had seen him do. The device beeped and showed numbers and colors. She couldn't read human language, but she understood colors. Red was bad. Yellow was not good. Green was okay. Most of the readings were yellow. She found more heat packs in the emergency kit and activated them by pressing the center like Taman had shown her. She placed them carefully around his body, at his core, by his hands, near his feet. One by one, the yellow readings began to shift toward green. Hours passed. Hyejin stayed awake, watching over all 3 of them. She checked on Jinwoo frequently, making sure his splint was secure and his breathing stayed steady. She watched Bora, waiting for her little sister to wake up, and she monitored the human, adjusting his blanket, moving heat packs when they cooled down. Outside, the storm continued. The wind howled and screamed, but the shelter Taman built held strong. Snow piled higher against their snow wall, actually making it stronger and better insulated. The cave stayed warm. They stayed alive. Hyejin found the food rations and ate another one, even though they tasted awful. She needed energy. She was the oldest. She was in charge now. That's what her mother always said. The oldest takes care of the others. She began to sing quietly. Old frackin' songs that her mother sang to them at bedtime. Songs about stars and home and family. Her voice was small in the cave, but it felt right to sing. It made the darkness less scary. I'm sorry I was afraid of you, she whispered to the unconscious Taman. I'm sorry I hissed at you. You're not scary at all. You're the kindest person I've ever met, and you're not even Vraken. She told him about her family, about her father who worked on survey ships mapping new worlds, about her mother who was a teacher, about how they had been on a family trip when the storm hit, and somehow she and her siblings had gotten separated from their parents. They're probably so worried, Hyejin said softly. But you found us. You saved us. When we get home, I'm going to tell everyone that humans aren't what they think. I'm going to tell them about you. More hours passed. Hyejin's eyes grew heavy, but she forced them to stay open. She couldn't sleep. Someone had to watch. Someone had to make sure everyone stayed safe. Then Bora stirred. Hyejin scrambled over to her little sister. Bora's 4 eyes opened slowly, confused and unfocused. Hyejin, she whispered. Her voice was tiny and rough. I'm here, Bora. I'm right here. Hyejin hugged her sister carefully. Tears ran down her face. You're okay. You're going to be okay. Cold, Bora mumbled. I know, but we have heat now. And shelter. A human built it for us. Hyejin pointed at Taman. Bora looked at the strange creature with the strange face and only 2 eyes. Human? She sounded scared. He's nice, Hyejin said firmly. He saved us. He's sleeping now because he got too tired taking care of us. We have to help him. Bora nodded slowly. Hyejin gave her some water from Taman's supply and a small piece of food ration. Bora made a face at the taste but ate it anyway. The storm began to quiet. It was still snowing, still cold, but the violent wind was dying down. Hyejin could tell the worst was passing. They had survived it. All of them. Then Taman groaned. His eyes flickered open. He looked confused, trying to remember where he was. Then his gaze found Hyejin, and she saw relief flood his face. You're awake, he croaked. His voice was rough. You fell asleep, Hyejin said. You were too cold. I moved you by the heater and gave you the warm blanket. Taman stared at her. You took care of me? You saved us, Hyejin said simply. I saved you. We're even now. Something changed in Taman's expression. He looked at this small alien child who had kept him alive, who had used his own techniques to help him, who had stayed awake and afraid but determined. His eyes got wet. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you, Hyejin. Bora is awake too, Hyejin announced proudly. And Jinwoo's leg looks better. We all made it. Taman sat up slowly, checking each of the cubs with the medical scanner.
Jinwoo was sleeping peacefully, his vitals strong.
Bora was weak but recovering. Hyejin was exhausted but alert. They were alive. They were all alive. The storm is passing, Taman said, listening to the wind. I should activate my emergency beacon. They'll come for us soon. Will you get in trouble? Hyejin asked. For saving us? Taman was quiet for a moment. Maybe, probably, but it doesn't matter. You're alive. That's what matters. That's not fair, Hyejin said, her voice getting stronger. You're a hero. Heroes shouldn't get in trouble. Sometimes being a hero means accepting the consequences, Taman said gently. He reached for his communication device and reactivated the emergency beacon. A soft beeping filled the cave. But it's worth it. You're worth it. They waited together in the warm shelter. Hyejin held Bora close. Jinwoo woke up and asked for water. Taman gave him some and checked his leg again. The boy smiled at him, showing small sharp teeth. Not a threat this time. A thank you. About an hour later, they heard the sound of engines overhead. Voices called out. Lights swept across the snow. The rescue team had arrived. Hyejin squeezed Taman's hand. Whatever happens next, I won't forget you. None of us will, Taman squeezed back. I won't forget you either. You kept us cozy when I couldn't. You're brave, Hyejin. Braver than you know. The entrance to their shelter was suddenly bright with lights. Voices shouted in multiple languages. And then a Vraken woman in emergency gear was crawling into the cave, her 4 eyes wide with disbelief and joy. Ambassador Suman, Hyejin cried out. She knew this woman. Everyone knew Ambassador Suman. The ambassador looked at the 3 cubs, alive and relatively healthy. She looked at the shelter, at the thermal generator, at the carefully arranged heat packs and blankets. She looked at the human who sat among them. exhausted and cold but smiling. And then Ambassador Suman did something that shocked everyone. She began to cry. 3 weeks later, Taman stood in the largest room he had ever seen. The Galactic Council chamber on Earth was enormous, with seats rising in circles around a central platform. Representatives from dozens of species filled those seats, their eyes fixed on him. Some looked curious, some looked angry, most looked uncertain. Taman wore a simple uniform. He had no lawyer, no prepared speech. Commander Daehyun sat in the human section, his face hard to read. The charges against Taman were serious. Violation of Galactic Council Law 47B, unauthorized intervention in alien affairs, potential endangerment of diplomatic relations. The prosecutor, a tall alien with silver skin and 3 arms, spoke in a voice that echoed through the chamber. The defendant admits he broke the law. He admits he ignored direct orders from his superior officer. He admits he disabled his tracking beacon to avoid being stopped. These are not the actions of someone who respects the council or its rules. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Several representatives nodded. The prosecutor continued. Humans are new to this council. We accepted them because we believed they could follow our laws. But how can we trust a species that breaks rules whenever they feel like it? What happens next time a human decides their feelings are more important than our laws? More nodding. More murmurs. Taman felt his stomach sink. They had already decided. This wasn't a trial. It was a show. The chief judge, an ancient being made of what looked like living crystal, spoke. Does the defendant wish to speak in his defense? Taman stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but steady. I don't have a fancy speech. I can only tell you what happened. I found 3 children dying in a storm. I knew help was too far away. I knew they would die if someone didn't act. So I acted. If that's wrong, if saving lives is against your laws, then I'm guilty, and I would do it again. The chamber erupted. Some species shouted in approval. Others shouted in anger. The chief judge called for order, and slowly, the noise died down. The law exists for a reason, the judge said. Without it, we have chaos. Without it, every species does whatever they want. That is not civilization. Then what is civilization? Taman asked. Is it following rules while children freeze to death? Is it choosing order over life? If that's what civilization means, then maybe I don't understand it. The chamber went silent. Even the prosecutor looked uncertain. The judge leaned forward. You admit you broke the law? Yes. You admit you would break it again? To save innocent lives? Yes. Every time. The judge was about to speak when a voice rang out from the Vraken section. I request permission to address the council. Everyone turned. Ambassador Suman stood, her crystalline fur catching the light. Permission granted, the judge said, sounding surprised. Ambassador Suman walked to the center platform. Her voice was clear and strong. I am the one who filed the original complaint against this human. I believed he had overstepped. I believed he had acted recklessly. I was wrong. The chamber exploded with noise again. The judge called for order, but it took longer this time. Finally, Ambassador Suman could continue. I went to that cave expecting to find a tragedy. I expected to find my people's cubs frozen, and perhaps a dead human who had foolishly tried to help. Instead, I found something I will never forget. She gestured to the back of the chamber and the doors opened. Hyejin, Jinwoo, and Bora walked in holding hands. Their parents walked with them, faces full of emotion. The cubs looked small but brave. I found 3 living, breathing children, Ambassador Suman said. I found a shelter built from snow and scrap metal. I found a human who had given everything, his warmth, his food, his energy, to keep strangers alive. And I found proof that everything we thought we knew about humans was incomplete. Hyejin walked to the center platform. She looked so small standing there, but her voice was strong. My name is Hyejin. I am 7 years old. I was taught that humans were dangerous, that they only cared about themselves, that they would hurt us if they got the chance. She looked directly at Taman. But when we were dying, when everyone said it was too late, when the rules said no one could help us, this human came anyway. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't ask what he would get. He just came. And he didn't just save our lives. He made sure we weren't scared anymore. Several representatives were wiping their eyes. Others leaned forward, listening intently. Jinwoo stepped forward next, still limping slightly despite his healing. He fixed my leg, Jinwoo said, his young voice carrying through the chamber. It hurt really bad. I thought I was going to die, but the human was gentle. He told me stories while he worked. He gave me his own warm blanket. He made the pain go away. Then Bora, the youngest, walked forward. She was still shy, still quiet. She reached into a small bag and pulled out a carved crystal, a Vrakan symbol that took weeks to make. She walked straight to Taemin and held it out to him. Taemin knelt down to her level. Bora put the crystal in his hands and whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Family." In Vrakan culture, giving someone the family crystal meant they were bonded forever. It was the highest honor, the deepest trust. The entire Vrakan section of the chamber stood up. Some placed their hands over their hearts. It was a sign of respect, of acknowledgement. Ambassador Suman's voice shook with emotion. The law said Taemin was wrong. The law said he should have waited. The law said proper channels and procedures were more important than 3 dying children. If that is what our law means, then our law is broken. She turned to face the entire council. I formally withdraw all complaints against Taemin. Furthermore, I petition for him to receive the Star of Compassion, the highest honor my people can give. He risked everything, his career, his freedom, his life for children who were not his own species, not his responsibility, not even from a friendly world. He did it because it was right, because someone had to, because leaving them to die was unacceptable to him. She paused, letting her words sink in. If humanity's greatest sin is that they refuse to let children die alone in the cold, then perhaps we need to examine our own hearts. Perhaps the problem is not with humans who break bad laws. Perhaps the problem is with laws that demand we do nothing while innocents suffer. The chief judge was silent for a long time. The chamber waited, barely breathing. Finally, the judge spoke. This council will vote on 2 matters. First, whether to punish Taemin for breaking the law. Second, whether to amend Law 47B to include emergency humanitarian exceptions. The vote took hours. Species argued. Some said rules must be absolute. Others said compassion must come first. Back and forth the debate raged. Finally, the results came. The first vote was overwhelmingly in Taemin's favor. All charges dropped. The second vote was closer, but it passed. Law 47B was amended. Emergency. Exceptions were now allowed for situations where lives were in immediate danger, and authorized help could not arrive in time. The media would later call it Taemin's Clause, the law that said sometimes breaking rules to save lives was not just acceptable but necessary. As Taemin left the chamber, free and honored, Yejin ran to him and hugged his leg. "You did it," she said. "You changed everything." Taemin looked down at her and smiled. "No," he said gently. "We did it. All of us together." Commander Daehyun approached, his expression softer than before. "I was wrong, Taemin. I prioritized procedure over lives. I thought following rules would prove we belonged here. But you showed us something better. You showed them who we really are." "Who are we, sir?" Taemin asked. Daehyun smiled. "We're the species that walks into blizzards for strangers. We're the ones who build shelters when there are none. We're the ones who refuse to accept that someone has to die just because it's inconvenient to save them." Ambassador Suman joined them. "The galaxy has watched humans with fear for so long. We expected conquerors. We expected aggression. We expected you to take and never give back." She looked at Taemin with respect. "You showed us we were wrong. You showed us that humanity's strength is not in weapons or ships or technology. It's in refusing to leave anyone behind." Outside the council building, snow was falling gently. Not the violent storm of Kiro 7, but a peaceful, quiet snow. Taemin stood with Hyejin, Jinwoo, and Bora watching it fall. "Are you scared of snow now?" he asked them. Hyejin caught a snowflake on her hand and watched it melt. "No," she said. "Snow is just snow. It's not good or bad. But people can choose to be good. You taught me that." Taemin felt something warm in his chest, something he hadn't felt since Myung died. Hope. Purpose. The knowledge that maybe, just maybe, he had done something that mattered. 6 months after the trial, Taemin stood at the window of his new office and looked out at the snow-covered landscape of Cairo 7. So much had changed, but the planet was still cold, still beautiful, still dangerous. The atmospheric processing outpost where he had once worked alone was now the center of something much bigger. The joint human-Vraken research station spread out around it, buildings connected by covered walkways. Scientists from both species worked side by side, studying the planet's weather, learning from each other, building trust. Taemin was no longer just an engineer. He was the director of this facility, chosen by both governments. It was a big responsibility, but he didn't face it alone. Ambassador Suman worked with him, and Commander Daehyun visited regularly. They had become friends, an unlikely team brought together by a storm. The original cave shelter had been preserved exactly as it was, encased in a transparent protective dome. People called it the Sanctuary of the Storm. Scientists studied it to understand survival techniques. Historians documented it, but for most people, it was a symbol, proof that compassion could overcome fear and prejudice. Taemin walked to the sanctuary now, his boots crunching in the fresh snow. Inside the dome, everything was frozen in time. The snow wall he had built, the scattered heat packs, the thermal blanket still lying where Hyejin had placed it over him. A plaque had been installed at the entrance. He read it again, even though he knew every word by heart. Here, one human refused to let bureaucracy be a death sentence. Here, children learned that monsters can be myths and heroes can be strangers. Here, the galaxy learned what humanity truly means. No one gets left in the cold. Reading your own memorial again? Taemin turned to see Hyejin walking toward him. She was taller now, 8 years old and growing fast. She wore a small engineer's tool belt that she had insisted on getting after her last visit. "I want to build things like you," she had told him. "I want to make shelters for people who need them." "Just making sure it's still accurate," Taemin said with a smile. "How are Jinwoo and Bora?" "Playing in the snow dome you built for them. Jinwoo says his leg doesn't even hurt anymore. He wants to be a doctor now so he can help people like you helped him." Hyejin looked up at the shelter inside the dome. "Do you ever think about that night? About how scared we were?" "Every day," Taemin admitted. "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night worried I won't reach you in time. Then I remember you're safe. You're all safe." "I think about it too," Hyejin said quietly. "But not because I was scared. I think about how you came for us. How you didn't care that we were different. How you worked until you collapsed." She looked at him seriously. "You changed my whole life, Taemin. You changed how I see the universe." "You changed mine too," Taemin said. "You reminded me why I wanted to help people in the first place. You reminded me that being scared is okay as long as you don't let it stop you." An alarm sounded across the station. Not an emergency, just a notification. Taemin checked his device and sighed. Another storm warning. Category 3 this time. "Will everyone be okay?" Hyejin asked, a touch of old fear in her voice. "Watch," Taemin said, gesturing to the station. Across the facility, teams were already moving. Human and Vraken workers grabbed emergency kits and loaded rescue vehicles. Communication channels buzzed with calm, professional voices. Everyone knew their jobs. Everyone knew what to do. They had learned from what happened 6 months ago. "We're ready now," Taemin explained. "We have protocols. We have mixed teams. We have equipment stationed at key points. If anyone gets caught in this storm, we'll reach them in minutes, not hours." Commander Daehyun's voice came through Taemin's communication device. "All teams deployed. We've got full coverage. No one's getting left out there." "Good," Taemin replied. "Keep me updated." Ambassador Suman joined them at the sanctuary, her crystalline fur dusted with fresh snow. "Another storm, another successful preparation. You've built something remarkable here, Taemin. Not just this station, but a new way of working together." "We built it," Taemin corrected. "All of us." "You convinced the council." Daehyun organized the resources. "The teams learned to trust each other." "I just started it." You did more than start it, Suman said firmly. You showed us what was possible. Before you, we thought cooperation meant following the same rules. You taught us that sometimes cooperation means having the courage to do what's right, even when the rules say otherwise. Hyejin tugged on Taemin's sleeve. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret it? Breaking the rules? Getting in all that trouble? Taemin knelt down so he was at her eye level. All four of her eyes looked at him with curiosity and trust. Every time I see you three running around the station, every time I watch your parents smile, every time I hear Jinwoo laugh or see Bora drawing pictures, I know I made the right choice. Not even a little bit of regret, Hyejin. Not even a little. Good, Hyejin said, a determined look on her young face, because you taught me something really important. You taught me that rules exist to protect people, but when the rules fail, someone has to be brave enough to do what's right anyway. Taemin felt his eyes get hot with emotion. She had learned exactly the right lesson. Not that rules didn't matter, but that compassion mattered more. Not that you should always break rules, but that you should always question rules that hurt people. The storm rolled in over the next hour. It was powerful but manageable. The teams did their jobs perfectly. No one was caught unprepared. No one was left alone. When the storm passed, everyone was accounted for. Everyone was safe. That evening, Taemin stood in the common area of the research station, watching humans and Vraken share a meal together. They laughed at each other's jokes even when the translation was clumsy. They talked about their families, their homes, their hopes. They were becoming more than co-workers. They were becoming friends. Jinwoo and Bora ran past, chasing each other in a game of tag with human children. Their parents sat with other parents, comparing stories and pictures. Cultural barriers were breaking down, not through laws or treaties, but through simple human and Vraken connection. Ambassador Suman stood beside Taemin, watching the same scene. You know what the most remarkable thing is? She asked. What's that? 6 months ago, most Vraken were afraid of humans. Now look at them. Our children play together. Our families eat together. Our scientists work together. And it all started because one human refused to let 3 children die. It's spreading too, Daehyun added, joining them. Other species are starting joint projects. The council is reviewing other outdated laws. The story of what happened here has traveled across the galaxy. People are calling it the beginning of a new era, Suman said. The era where we stop seeing each other as threats and start seeing each other as neighbors who might need help someday. Taemin thought about his sister Myung. He thought about the guilt he had carried for years, the weight of not being there when she needed him. That weight was lighter now. It would never be gone completely, but it was bearable. He had turned his guilt into purpose. He had turned his pain into protection for others. What are you thinking about? Hyejin asked, appearing at his side with a cup of hot chocolate. I'm thinking that my sister would have liked you, Taemin said softly. She would have been proud of what we built here. I wish I could have met her, Hyejin said. But in a way I feel like I know her. She made you who you are, and who you are saved us. Outside, snow began to fall again. Soft and gentle this time, not angry or violent. Just peaceful snow painting the world white. Through the windows, Taemin could see the sanctuary of the storm, lit up in the darkness, a reminder of where they had been and how far they had come. Hyejin looked out at the falling snow. You know what I realized? What's that? The universe is full of storms. Some are weather, some are politics, some are fear and prejudice and misunderstanding. But there will always be people like you, Taemin. People who build shelters. People who share their warmth. People who refuse to let anyone suffer alone. Taemin smiled and put his hand on her shoulder. And now there are people like you too. You learned how to keep others cozy when I couldn't. You learned that being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. You're going to do amazing things, Hyejin. We both will, she said confidently, because that's what we do. That's what humans do. That's what anyone should do. The snow continued to fall through the night, covering the world in white. But inside the research station, in homes across Kairos 7, in the hearts of everyone who knew the story, there was warmth. There was hope. There was the knowledge that when storms came, people would not face them alone, because one human had walked into a blizzard for 3 alien children. Because one human had refused to accept that following rules was more important than saving lives. Because one human had built a shelter when there was none, and had kept them cozy until help arrived. And in doing so, He had built something much bigger than a shelter. He had built a bridge between species. He had built trust where there was fear. He had built a future where no one had to face the cold alone. The blizzard had trapped the cubs, but the human had made a shelter and kept them cozy. And that simple act of compassion had changed everything.